but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.
Good evening and welcome along to NUFC Matters. It is the Retro Show, and this week we are looking at games between Newcastle United and the Canaries, Norwich City. Looking forward to this one. Strange games between Newcastle and Norwich. Not as many as there is with other teams, but joined as always tonight by George Mitchell, Neil Mitchell, Stu Penman, Steve Hasty and Steve Wilkinson. Good evening, lads. George, we'll start with you. Coming to you first with your first recollection of Newcastle United versus Norwich.
The game that I wanted to talk about was in 1972 when Norwich came back into the top flight. It was in October. They weren't playing particularly well, but the game itself is another one which, for me, sticks in my mind because of the performance of one of our players. Last time I talked about how when Davies ran a game that we could have lost. Well, this one, it was John Tudor's game. He got 2 goals and should have had a hat-trick. The third goal came from Ron Guthrie, and it was from a knockdown from John Tudor. And they just couldn't touch John Tudor that day. We weren't playing particularly well at the time either. So to give you an idea of what the attraction to the fans was, the crowd was only 18,000, which for us is something of a disaster. But it was a good game, and Norwich had 2 players of any note. That was David Cross, the big centre forward striker character, and the other one was a very crafty Scotsman on the wing, or sometimes in midfield, called Jim Bone, who had a thunderbolt shot, but was very, 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 very clever player as well. I mean,
not the Jim Bone, of course, from Bullseye.
No. No. This one was a Scot who played football. But Jim Bone was, as I say, had a thunderbolt shot and a very crafty player. The other thing about the game for me is, of course, it highlighted how many people we had in the team who could play the ball. I mean, we're talking recently about Shelby's goal the other night and how something his long passing game and all the rest of it. Well, in this particular team, now just have a look at it. In this particular team, we had Terry Hibbert, Jinky Jim Smith, and Tommy Gibb. Well, there's 3 players alone who in my opinion, could match Shelby's long ball passing. In fact, 2 of them, Jinky Jim Smith and Terry Hibbert, could more than match it because they could also do box to box all day. Well, with Shelby, we get box to box for about 2 runs, and that's him knackered for the rest of the game. But these 3, as I say, could hit a sixpence from 100 yards away. Also in that particular team was some of the emerging players for later on, like David Craig and as I said, Ron Guthrie, and Stuart Barraclough, and young Hodgson was coming into the team then. But as I say, it was a quite a good game, considering it was a team from way down the bottom of the league to playing us when we weren't particularly playing well. And we beat them 3-1. Cross scored the opener, which was the worst thing he could have done, because after that we came alive, like it happens so many times. And then the game was all about how many goals could John Tudor got. He got 2, and he certainly assisted in the third one. And it was just an outstanding game for John Tudor. A hard shot, a diving header, and the third goal was a knockback off the goalkeeper off a shot of John Tudor's, which Ron Guthrie side-footed in. So that's 1972, and as I say, a Norwich City team that had just come up, and really a team of not many noted players. Like the goalkeeper was quite well known, but the two, David Cross and Jim Bone, were the ones that mattered. So that's my first memory of Norwich City.
Great stuff, George, as always. Over to you, Mitch. Your first memory of Norwich City and Newcastle.
Well, for me, Norwich have been a team that I've always seemed to enjoy watching, because I always seem to want to play football the right way. No matter which era you look at them. The two games I'm going to talk about are actually two games from the same season, and it might become clear when I talk about the second game why. So I'm going to talk about the 88-89 season, and we've discussed that team, that bloody team before. We made all these signings, we spent a lot of money, brought two FA Cup winners in from Wimbledon, and one of the most exciting talents in Scotland. And I had it in my head, that was it. We're going to win something this year. This is going to be our year. And of course, the opening day we got thumped at Everton, and it didn't really get much better than that. And by the time Norwich came to St James's Park early in the season, I think it was either the fifth or the sixth game, and I think we had 1 point by then from a draw against Spurs, if I remember rightly. We'd had a couple of whack-ins, and we just really never got started. And this game was no better. We lost 2-0 at home. It was really the first time the name Dale Gordon had come into my radar. And it was the Dale Gordon show. He absolutely thrashed with. Everything went through him. The backline couldn't seem to cope with him. And a horrible, nasty Scottish striker that people remember by the name of Robert Fleck was the other one that did the damage. And again, another striker actually at the time would have quite liked to have seen in a black and white shirt, to be honest with you. But it was that blinking team that would spend all that money on, and would just look ordinary that day. I seem to remember Bezzett in goal in particular looking like a headless chicken, flying out and conceding a penalty against Fleck and making him do a triple salto in the process, and just really disorganised and played off the pitch by a team who was just playing superior football to what we were. And by the end of that game, I think it dawned on everybody in St James's Park it was going to be a long season, and oh boy, was that a long season.
Yeah, very true, very true. Remember that game very clearly. Yeah, over to you then, Stu. Your first memory of Newcastle versus Norwich.
Right, just answer the question that Mark Byers is asking. It was 2-0 was the score, and it was the promotion season 92-93. We won 2-0 at Carroll Road. They released their DVD. That was actually called the Entertainers or something, because we played them off the park, and it was Keegan said it was the best performance he'd had. Right, back to Norwich. I always had a soft spot for Norwich, and I was trying to work out why. And then looking through when I was doing a bit of research for the show, I realised that it's because they beat Sunderland in '85 in the Milk Cup final.
That's right. Steve Bruce was there. Was he captain?
Right. I think he was. I think Bruce definitely he won. Yeah, he did, because I remember him with the trophy as well. So 2 years later, I remember my birthday's on the 8th of April, so I just thought I'd get that in earlier. But 2 years later, we played them on the 8th of April, which was my becoming a teenager in 1987. And we beat them 4-1 that day. And what I remember for that was you had some friends around them. We all went to the match and we were in the scoreboard. And they had a player up front, Kevin Drinkle. And he ran from his own half and scored. And we're 1-0 down, and you're thinking, here we go, what a bad birthday. And, the gods are conspiring against you. And then from there on, it became the Paul Gascoigne show. And that was Gascoigne at his exuberant, flamboyant best. He was just unstoppable that day. Paul Sarge Goddard, who had an uncanny knack of being in the right place at the right time, no matter the fact that he wasn't the tallest either. He equalised, and then Gascoigne was doing all his shimmies and everything else, and he scored. And then to clinch it near the end, they brought Darren Jackson on. And I wasn't happy that signed Darren Jackson, because he was an ex-Hibs player. But I was happy that he made it 4-1, which spoiled the 3-1. Well, I wasn't betting 3-1 at that time, but we won 4-1. But I forgive Jackson because he signed for Hearts later in his career. The other time, which I didn't realise until researching, and it's quite clear what I tell you, when they played Norwich again on my birthday, was my 21st birthday. I didn't go to the game because I had a prior engagement with a copious amount of alcohol. So I didn't go to the game, and that's probably why I can't remember the score when Newcastle played that day. So strange enough, I played Norwich on the day I become a teenager, and the day 21, I suppose, the day I officially become a man, innit? So that was my first recollections of Norwich, and I'll speak about another game later on.
Great stuff. Steve Hasty, welcome again, mate. Your view, your first memory of Newcastle against Norwich.
It's not really a first memory, but it was my latest memory. I put it that way because I knew the guys were going to go back in time, and my memory just goes back to that game we had at home when we beat them 6-2, where Wijnaldum scored 4, Perez got 1, and Mitro scored 1. Now, the reason it sticks in my mind was because the week before I'd been to Man City and we'd been absolutely trounced 6-1. Mitrovic scored. We took the lead and then we got absolutely hammered. Aguero just went berserk on us. And so when it came to the following game, I just remember saying to George, "I'll not be at the match, George. I'm going to Germany on a stag do." And it was my pal Adam Wilson, my pal Paul Wilson. It was his son Adam stag do. 24 of us headed off to Dusseldorf, go to see a game at Schalke, and then spend a little bit of time, quietly seeing the sights of the Altstadt in Dusseldorf. And so having been hammered 6, I wasn't really interested in the game. We went to an Irish bar, piled into this Irish bar, and I think there was rugby on, so there was a bit of a competition going on with people on what TV to watch. Anyway, we squeezed against the end of a bar and started to watch Newcastle with one eye, and just couldn't believe what was going on. The fact that we ended up winning 6-2. Now, what was interesting about that game as well, and the both games that I've picked, I've tried to put it in a bit of perspective about where we are now. And that result, that 6-2 win after a 6-1 hammering, actually took us off the bottom of the league that particular season. We played 9 games, we had 6 points on the board. But we played the game, we won a game 6-2 at home with 44% possession. We had 11 shots during the game against Norwich's 18. We had 6 shots on target from the 6 goals we scored, and we only managed 3 corners. And you're looking at it and you're thinking that took us off the bottom of the league. And it sounds so familiar to the sort of thing that's been going on recently under various managers. Obviously, that was McLaren. But I've got to say, anyone who wants to go to Dusseldorf, tripped out the Altstadt, a few beers or 2 or 3 or 4 days worth, you'll thoroughly enjoy it, especially when you win in the middle of the afternoon 6-2.
I can't believe you went all the way to Dusseldorf Altstadt and ended up in an Irish bar, man. How weird.
Well, that's what happens, isn't it? That's what happens. You know that it's going to happen. I mean, has anyone here ever been abroad and to a city and not visited an Irish bar? They're everywhere, man. You kind of get moved for them.
or searched out an English breakfast.
Well, there is that as well, of course, yes.
I can take you to one in Athens, Steve.
The sausages aren't the same in Athens. Definitely not. Steve Wilkinson, good evening, mate. Your first recollection of Newcastle Norwich.
Right, well, I'm going way back to actually, it was strangely enough the game before the one George talked about, but it was 7 years earlier in the season 64-65 when we got promoted. And, we were in the first division, and it was right until then when Norwich got up. So we didn't play them for 7 years. But I was still a youngster going with my dad to the games at that time. And I cannot remember too much about the game itself, but it was the build-up to the game and the circumstances around that game that was there. There was about 8 or 9 games left in the season, and in the second division, we were at that time top of the league. In fact, I think we're second in that weekend. But behind Northampton, there was a big ding dong between us and Northampton for going up. But Norwich were third, so it was a vital game that actually, if had Norwich won, they would have gone above us and we would have dropped down to third. And in those days, only 2 went up, and no playoffs or anything like that. So it was a pretty critical game. 41,000 in the ground, so there was a lot of build up to the game itself. And the 2 players I want to mention significantly on that game is first of all for Norwich, a guy called Ron Davies, who was no relation to Wyn Davies, but a very similar player. And ultimately, as you know, we signed Wyn Davies the year after, and we had been talk about a signing Ron Davies. So he was a big centre forward. Ultimately, the very similar careers. They were almost similar age. They went through playing up front for Wales together. And I think ultimately Ron went to Southampton when we got Wyn. And Ron scored a hell of a lot of goals. I think he scored about 100 more goals than Wyn. But I'm never going to regret that we got Wyn Davies. But starting his career around about that time was a guy called Pop Robson, a youngster actually from Sunderland, but he made his start with us. Although he played for Sunderland several times in later years. And he had started playing the beginning of that season, and was in and out the team. We had a fantastic team at that time. You could name that team, and it was particularly the back half of the team. It was just consistent. Gordon Marshall in goal, fullbacks Craig and Clark. The half back line was just renowned as being solid. Stan Anderson, John McGrath, and Jim Eiley, and no doubt John McGrath sorted Ron Davies out on that day in the same way that he did against Wyn Davies a few weeks later when we played Bolton in the game that eventually clinched promotion. But Pop Robson was only 19 years old. Can you imagine playing a 19-year-old striker? What a stupid thing to do, trying to put a youngster in, a local lad. But he scored about 7 or 8 goals that season, and one of them was in that game against Norwich after only about 10 minutes. So it set the seal on the game. So it was a great start to the game. As I say, 41,000. The atmosphere before and during the game, which I can remember, was fantastic because of the circumstances of it. The second goal was scored by a guy called Bobby Cummins, who was an interesting character. He was actually a minor, and he'd started his career at Newcastle, but then went and played local football at Ashington, and ultimately went on to Aberdeen in Scotland and scored quite a few goals for Aberdeen. But the story about him is he still worked as a miner down Bates welfare pits while he was playing for Aberdeen, because it was a sort of part-time thing. So he also scored about 7 or 8 goals that season, and ultimately we went up. We won that game, Norwich. That put us top of the league, as Northampton only drew that day. So that put us top of the league, and then the run into the end of the season, as many people remember, was significantly that Bolton game on Good Friday, when the biggest crowd I've ever been at St James's Park, 59,960 were in, and I was on the pitch at the end, like everybody else, and it was a fantastic season that got us into the first division.
God, on the days when you could get on the pitch, on the days when you could go to the ground, God, it seems like we're talking about yesterday, but proper yesterday. Will we ever get back to going back to the games? God only knows. George, back to you for your second story, mate. Oh, you're still on mute, George. You're still on mute. There you go. You need to unmute yourself. You're still on mute, George. I'm not sure if you... Can you do it?
That's it.
Yes, that's it. Got you.
Sorry, folks.
It's all right.
I said when Steve asked us about what I was going to do, this bit I said was going to be a surprise, and I hope it's not too much of a surprise. It really is my very first experience of Norwich City. The only trouble is it's an FA Cup third round tie, and the other club involved isn't Newcastle United. They happen to play in a stadium 13 miles south of where we used to live. Because my father, I think I've told you on here before, on a Saturday when there was something special happening or a big team going to Joker Park, we would slip through the pedestrian tunnel and pick up the Sunderland buses that come from Ashington and get a ride into Sunderland and watch the match there. In the days when you could do that without fear of getting slaughtered or killed or anything. Well, this particular time, my father had got given 2 tickets for this FA Cup third round tie in 55-56. And the other reason he wanted to go to see Norwich City was when he was in the RAF, he was stationed in East Anglia and got to go to Norwich and Ipswich quite often while he was on the RAF base. And at the time, he had a particular liking for one of the Norwich players who was coming to the end of his career. One of the first man of Chinese origin to play for England in a wartime international. His real name was Cyril Chung, but everybody knew him as Sammy Chung. Now, I tried to find out why he was Sammy, and I stopped in case I start to dip into racial things in this modern era where you've got to be very, very careful. So we decided we'd go to this cup tie before I had this tickets. The other thing I've got to say is that my birthday is Boxing Day, just after Christmas. And one of my aunts, one of my dad's eldest sisters, Mary, always used to try and find what she called stocking fillers that were different. And my cousin Moira, her daughter, said to her mother, well, get him a football scarf. That'll be a good stocking filler for him. So I didn't just get one football scarf. I got 2. I got a nice black and white one. And the other one was the most beautiful green and yellow scarf you could imagine. And so I said to her, Moira, what the hell should I buy that for? She says, well, she just says, I think our George would look nice in this. But it was green and yellow. So I decided, much to my father's chagrin, that I would wear my green and yellow scarf to Roker Park for this cup tie. And so I put it on underneath my windsheet and off we go to Jarrah through the pedestrian tunnel to pick up these buses. And all the way my dad says, hey, you're going to get stick by that laddie, that scarf. So, George wouldn't be told. So on we get on the bus. And I'd hardly got two steps up the aisle on the bus to get a seat when somebody said, you're on the right bus, lad. Straight away. And there was all those sort of snide remarks coming backwards and forwards, but nothing hurtful. I think if you tried it now, you probably would get strangled with the scarf. Where then there were some remarks which were jocular and all the rest of it, and you could take it. But as I say now, I don't think you'd get off the bus. Anyway, we got to Roker Park, and the only thing my father made us do with the scarf was when we got up to the turnstile, he made us stick the scarf inside the windsheeter so you couldn't actually see it outside in case the turnstile man took exception to it. And in we went. Well, throughout the game, there was lots of comments about, are you in the right end and all that sort of thing. But of course, it got a bit more difficult because Sunderland was supposed to be going to wipe Norwich in this cup tie and were 2-1 down at half time, and it didn't look like there was anything going to go right for them, even though it was the Bank of England team. I mean, you're talking about Anderson, Daniel, Aitken, Bingham, Chisholm, Fleming, Shackleton, Elliott. Those names were all in the team, and a crowd of 55,000. But slowly but surely they wore Norwich down, and they ended up winning 4-2. So then we went back to find our bus home, and when we got to the bus park, our particular bus was gone. And of course, my father was quick to say, there you are, that's because you wore that bloody scarf. They've gone without one. Anyway, our bus had gone, so I had to find some other means of getting back to Jarrah. As it happens, there was other buses going in that direction. So we got back to Jarrah and through the tunnel home. But as I say, that was my very first experience of Norwich City. And Sammy Chung was outstanding in the game for them. And much to my father's pleasure because it was somebody he liked. So that was my first memory, and I'm, as I say, not necessarily what you might have been expecting today.
No, very good though. That's it. Variety is the spice of life, and always like to hear your stories. Mark Byers says could listen to Mr. Mitchell Senior all night. So there you go. Good story, Mitch. What's your second tale about Newcastle Norwich?
Okay, so wind forward in that same disastrous 88-89 season to March, and by that time we'd changed manager. Jim Smith had come in, for Willie McFall. And he made so many changes, wheeled and dealed. Was put in a position where all the money had been spent and he didn't fancy any of them. And he was trying to bring his players in on a shoestring. So much so, there was only 4 players from the first game earlier that season made the team for the return game. Now that return game was the first time I'd ever been to Norwich, and you forget how far it is. Not just because you go down, you then go out, and it turns into something like Lord of the Rings and all these bloody small back country roads. It's like a never-ending journey through Mordor, and you eventually get there, and by that time you've got casualties on the bus, you've got casualties who can barely get into the bloody ground, and we'll get there. But by that time in the season, we'd started to put a run together. I think we'd got something like 3 or 4 points away from safety, and we had this feeling that, if we keep this run going, we could do it. We were starting to click. We were starting to play some football. And that day, we really did play some football. It was a total contrast. We did to them at Carrow Road what they did to us at St James's Park. If I remember right, the first goal was Mirandina, doing only what Mirandina could do. Little shimmy into the area and then a cross shot across the keeper into the bottom corner. And second half would never look in danger until Liam O'Brien made it 2 with, again, a typical Liam O'Brien shot. 1-2 and running through to the edge of the area and hitting an absolute cracker into the bottom corner. And that give with that H word, that kills us every time. Hope. Here we are, we've got a chance, we might turn this around. And the kicker is, we had another 9 games to play, with teams like Borough and Villa and West Ham sinking like stones. And we only managed to pick another 2 points up out of the next 9 games. That was where the wheels came off. And it, as ever with Newcastle United, it's the hope that kills you. We ended up relegated by the start of May. I think we finished bottom by about 7 or 8 points in the end, because we something just then after that game, whether it was a little bit of complacency, we thought we could just keep it going. But yeah, it was that glimmer of hope in one of the most dismal seasons, and a great game actually. If you go back on YouTube, the goals are 2 bloody good goals, and that was the annoying thing about that team. When they clicked, they really clicked, but when they were bad, by God, they were awful. And the classic Newcastle United story of that little glimmer of hope that damns us all to hell.
Good stuff. Big shout out to our sponsor for this month, Spider VPN. Great to have the guys on board sponsoring the StreamYard application. And a big shout out to John at qtechshop.co.uk, makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. They also make our t-shirts and our mugs, which you can get from newcastlelegends.com. Also a big shout out to John from Jab Signature, who makes all the posters and all the flyers. And if you're a first time visitor to the channel, please just click the little logo in the bottom right hand corner and you can subscribe to the channel. You'll be notified when the programs are coming on, and if you click the little thumbs up and give the video a like, that is good for us. If you click the share button, that takes us to your social media, and you can share us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn and the rest. And we're also on iTunes and Spotify and all your other podcast providers. You can listen to us when you're out walking your dog, maybe, if you miss one of the live shows. Obviously, well covered for NUFC Matter stuff this week. We've had some fantastic ex-players on just to celebrate our first year as a podcast. We've interviewed Gavin Peacock, which was on Sunday. He talks about his new book, A Greater Glory, From Pitch to Pulpit, which comes out on the 7th of May. We're speaking to Rob Lee on Monday, which was a great interview, really. Very honest opinion opinions there about Graham Jones. And then yesterday we had Lee Clark on. You can get all of these in the 1990s Players podcasts. Today was rather special. We had Nobby Solano on and a little guest appearance by Tino Asprilla as well. So get onto the playlists, look for interviews with 90s players, and you will be able to find all of those interviews. And there are a few more to come. Tomorrow night, I will be doing a late shift. I'll be doing this with Warren Barton, so tune in for that. We'll also have Supermac and Gibbo on, as usual, on Thursday night, so we'll be doing that as well. So 2 great shows tomorrow night and a few more surprises lined up for the rest of the week. And don't forget the 3 Amigos, of course, on Friday. So Stu, over to you for your second Norwich Newcastle story.
It's the one that Steve Hasty mentioned, the 6-2 game. I'd flown back from Dubai for it. It was the first game I'd flown back from Dubai for. And there was a bit of a reunion, but like friends up from Southampton, from Yorkshire, scattered around the town. Like my brother was there, the Heat was there, obviously. Who else? Dickler, Jimmy Sugar. There was a big group of us. So you can imagine Saturday being a very loud evening and boisterous and lots of alcohol. And you get home for about 3-4 in the morning, and then Stevie Burns very kindly insisted that we join him in the Black Bull on the Sunday for the game. 12 o'clock opens the bar, 4 o'clock kickoff, and it was just a brown ale breakfast, so it was very Lionel messy. And we get on to the game, and as everyone knows, I'm back 3-1. And when it finished 6-2, I was that drunk, I started winding up the Heat and telling them I'm going to the bookies. I want paid out twice because they won 3-1 twice when it been 6-2. And he's like, "Oh, you can't get this. You'll never get this. You never get away with this." Well, obviously, I wasn't going to go and do it. So Heat's dad's birthday today as well, by the way.
Happy birthday!
Aye, big Brian, top man. So a lot of things as Steve Hasty's just mentioned. It was our first win of the season. We'd just been cubbed. Did Aguero not score a load of goals in that game the week before when we got beat 6-1? So I'm sure that might have been the game he scored 5 against us. But yeah, I might be wrong. It was, So it's typical Newcastle. You get beat 6-1 one game and you win 6-2 the next. You know, there's no rhyme or reason to watching them, and we've known this for all the years. But that win in the style of Dini Williams scoring the 4, and it's again what Mitch referred to earlier. It gave us hope, even with McLaren. It gave us hope that there was something bad happening tonight. Something bad was going to come off him, but we thought we could win enough to stay up, and hopefully that he would be gone. He didn't go. We know what happened after that, and that night I ended up in Jurassic Park, or I believe you call it Sergeant Pepper's. And there was a dance-off between Dickler and the Heat. That's the last memory I could have. And then I had to fly back to Dubai on I think the flight's just after midday, so we had to be at the airport for 11 o'clock. You know, so how I managed to get on that plane and actually get access into the United Arab Emirates after the much drink I had that weekend. But unfortunately, it was a highlight of a very poor season for us with the McLaren season. Both teams, Norwich and Newcastle, got relegated that year, and we seem to play them quite often. They seem to come down when we do. When we're in the Championship as it's now, they've been there quite often. Yeah. There was someone that mentioned earlier, I think it might have been Paul Oxley, asking about the playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League. I think it was a UEFA Cup. I don't think the Champions League was about at that time. You're joking. He's not from Argentina, is he?
Good evening.
From Brazil, mate.
Good evening. Good evening, Mirror. How are you? Can you hear me?
How are you? Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Good to have you on, and Happy New Year. We haven't spoken.
Happy New Year to all of you.
Yeah, you're looking well. I bet you it's a lot warmer there than it is in Newcastle.
A little bit bold, but no problem. The rest okay.
That's good, my friend. That's good. Well, tonight we are talking about Newcastle United against Norwich City. Can you remember that game?
Yes, I have a great memories from that game.
Yeah.
Hi,
what
John.
was it?
How are you, John? John Gibson. How are you? Are you okay?
Oh, Steve Hasty thinks you're John Gibson. You look like him. He looks like Eric Gates.
I will never forget you and all the people from Newcastle.
What was it like playing at Norwich City Mirror at Carrow Road? What was it like that night?
Well, it was very exciting game. I had my debut for Newcastle United in that time. I remember the free kick I took from the halfway line. The ball go to them and hit the fans upstairs. But it was fantastic atmosphere, and I was so happy that.
What was it like coming to Newcastle for the first time?
I was so impressed with Newcastle club and Newcastle people. I play for some good clubs in Brazil, but when I arrived there, I saw the difference from the fans, from the public in general. It was fantastic.
Good stuff. Can you just pick your phone up a little bit, Mirror, because your microphone was just a little bit muffled there. We got most of it, but it was a little bit muffled. Last thing before we let you go, Gascoigne. Any stories about Gaza?
Gaza, he always try to encourage me to speak English, but only by the words.
We're losing you a little bit, Mirror. We're losing you a little bit. The reception's not good. It'll be all that sun. It just sounds like a fly now, Mirror. Unfortunately, Mirror, we've lost you a little bit there. But can we hear you again? You might be getting a phone call. Technology isn't the greatest. Are you back? No, we can't hear you, Mirror. We cannot hear you, mate. Unfortunately, we'll bring him back if he can. John Gibson, that's a first, Steve.
That's a new one, that one, Steve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you'll have to get the Just for Men out again, mate.
Definitely,
Bit of an age difference, isn't it?
Fantastic.
I'll have to polish his seat next to me when we go.
Great to have Mirandina on anyway. It is our birthday week, so I did say there'd be a few surprises during the show. So Mirandina tonight, ladies and gentlemen. For those of a certain vintage, me especially as well, I remember those eras. I was one of the daft buggers who bought a sombrero when sombreros have got nothing to do with Brazil. But yes, great days, great memories, and Mirandina, the first Brazilian to play, obviously, in English football, Francisco Anindi Lima da Silva. What a player and a great guy. Top bloke. Steve, your next memory about
just
Newcastle Norwich.
From that when Paul mentioned the UEFA, I think Rule Fox played in that game. Rule Fox was at Norwich at the time, and I think it was the performances that Rule put in the UEFA Cup when they did beat Bayern Munich 2-1 away, which I think was they were the first team to win away from home, win a game in Germany, beat a German team in Germany, which was an amazing feat in a European competition. But I think it was the performances that Rule put in that season that persuaded Kevin to then go out and buy him. So when he came and joined Newcastle United the following season, based on the performances he put in. Just a little aside, just to keep Paul, because he's hammering away on those messages, isn't he? So he's flying them through. But the next game, I was going to bring it right up to date. The last time we played them, it was only February last year. It was this time last year we played them, and we played out one of the most ridiculous 0-0 draws you've ever seen. A game where Newcastle could have been 3, 4, 5 now down. You know, it was one of those games where Dubravka made a couple of really good saves where Timur Pucci, I think it's called. He had one of those games where he couldn't hit a barn door at 5 paces. They were going in. There was the side netting. They were over the bar. He was clean through at one point, if I remember rightly. And Fernandez came back and made a last-ditch block tackle But you know, we got booed off the park that day. That was only a year ago. We got booed off the park, a 0-0 draw that moved up to 10th place in the league. and it's just like, you know, it's just like deja vu. This, you know, when I looked at the game, the first game I chose, and where we were in the league and coming off the bottom, and then you look at this one, which, like I say, is 12 months ago. It took us, as I say, put us into 10th. It meant that we were 7 points clear of the bottom three, and we played, as the commentator said, the match of the day, Newcastle were playing like an away team. we had just sat back and we just seemed happy for Norwich to play the ball and just play it in front of us the entire time, and we just dropped off and just let them, and then we just occasionally tried to nab them on the break. And that's 12 months ago, and that's Bruce Ball. That's Bruce's football. You know, the whole thing about Bruce. He wants to play his style. That was the style he was playing it when he got into 10th place, and when we were 7 points clear of the bottom three in last February, and nothing's really changed. You know, you look at where we are now. So that 0-0 is one of the last times we were at St James's Park, and we booed them off the park. And we all know that other than last weekend, if we were in St James's Park, we'd still be booing them off the park, Steve.
True, very true. Steve Wilkinson, last but no means least on this part of the show, your last memory of Newcastle versus Norwich.
Right. Well, it kind of links with Mitch's second game, because unlike the one when I talked about George, that was the time before that. It was the next time after we played that, and there was another 5 years gap, because as Mitch says, we went down that season. Norwich had a good team at that time. I think they finished. They might have even finished third in the league, and but it was the time shortly after the Hazel, and they didn't qualify for Europe because of the British teams being banned, so that they didn't get another chance to play in Europe at that time. But the next time we played them was the only time I've been to Carrow Road. As Mitch says, it's a hell of a long way, but I was living in the Midlands at the time, so it was a slightly shorter distance. And we played them in the just after the New Year, and I actually went to more away games then, because it was nearer away games, and while Norwich was a trek, I went with mates that had Newcastle fans that I knew in that area. So we went.
Oh, Steve, we've lost you.
The wheelchair section at Norwich at that time was an indoor facility in the corner of the ground. I think it's still there, although I think there are other places in the ground. So you're actually behind glass, and it mixed in with their fans, which wasn't ideal. But at least you were warm for a cold January evening. But it was another fantastic performance by the entertainers, as we were that season, as you recall, the team that went up and were not. We really impressed everybody in that time, and it was a game we won, and two fantastic goals. One by Beardsley, typical Beardsley goal. The ball glued to his foot, and wasn't. He wriggled through a few defenders and poked it in. We'd actually been losing 1-0 from an early goal from Norwich. And the winner was scored by Andy Cole. Again, a typical Andy Cole goal, but from a forward pass. We're not used to forward passes these days, are we? But an absolutely brilliant forward pass by, would you believe, Robbie Elliott played in midfield. And he put a precision, probably 20-yard pass inside the penalty area. And Andy Cole just ran onto it, as he often did with passes from the likes of Lee Clark and others, and just rounded the keeper and slotted it in. And a fantastic night. So it made up for the long trek still. It was still a long trek from Nuneaton, but not quite as far as going from Newcastle. But you still had all those roads and country lanes that Mitch was talking about, having to get across. So that was my second memory, and the only time I've ever been to Carrow Road, because it is a hell of a trek.
Yeah, it is. Any memories then, George? I mean, have you been down to Carrow Road? I'm being presumptuous there, but have you ever been down there? Have you been there for an away game?
The answer is no. It's one place I haven't been to. No.
No, it is a bit of a trek. I've been down to it, and I've got to be honest, it's quite a friendly place. I've always found, they're very welcoming, and which is always good when you go down to an away ground. But there's no trouble.
I've been to the area professionally, because we there's one of the smaller propeller manufacturers has a place on the is it the Stour, the river down there, and their place isn't too far away from Carrow Road, so I know the place reasonably well. And you're absolutely right, an extremely friendly place. And indeed, some of those people I met 30, 40 years ago, I still talk to now on social media because of the links that were had in days gone by. So you're right, a very friendly place. As was Ipswich, the other East Anglia club as well, exactly the same, but of course they have a closer connection to us than Norwich does.
Yeah, with Sir Bobby.
Rob, yeah. And Jackie Milburn.
Yeah, correct. You forget about Jackie as well. Yeah, you do.
Talk about academies and things that's starting up. If you go to Ipswich and talk about Jackie Milburn, they'll tell you he started their youth program in academies and getting young people into the club. That was Jackie Milburn.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Mitch, any trips down to Norwich?
I'll tell you one that's very much related, but it wasn't for a match. I went down there with the lads from the Fairs Club, who keep in touch with all the Fairs Cup team, and we had a fantastic day with Ollie Burton down there. And what an absolute gentleman. I think at the time he was doing some sort of ambassadorial role for Norwich. And what an absolutely sweet, wonderful man who deserves every bit of praise as a former player and part of the team that last won or something that he can get. And he was immensely touched by the fact that we'd taken time out. I think it was on an FA Cup weekend, because obviously we don't get past the fourth round these days. And we went down and we had a horrendous journey on the train with replacement bus services from Peterborough and all sorts. But it didn't matter to see the absolute huge smile on his face when we made a little presentation for him. And we spent the day in Norwich, welcome as Black and White as coming to meet one of our former heroes. And it was a really, really wonderful day out, and it was a privilege to be there.
And he sent me an autographed photograph back with you as well, which I've still got.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Good stuff. Stu, any tales from Southampton, from Norwich City? Sorry.
I'm still stunned about Miradina being on the show next to us.
Yeah, Clark, told you there'd be a few surprises this week.
You're right there, mate. I was wanting to say thank you to him because he used to live in Forden, and I went to get his autograph with a couple of mates when I must have been 30 years ago. And I never said thank you at the time. I was just that excited that you can't do that nowadays. Can you knock on a footballer's door for an autograph? You know, but that was amazing. So thank you again. Well done.
No problem. Just about the ground and that, it is a welcoming place. Have you been down to an away match there?
I have, but not to watch Newcastle play. In a past job, I was working and I got sent to Cromer for a little spell, only for a couple of weeks, which is not far from Norwich. And I believe they were playing Tottenham, and the game finished. Well, I know they were playing Tottenham. The game finished. I think the game finished 1-1. But they were very, very welcoming. You know, and they would make fun of the accent. You could make fun of their accent. You know, it was just general banter, as the phrase is, but really welcoming people. And the trip to get there is bad. Like, I've been to Newmarket for the races, and it's not far, right? That's Suffolk, but you feel like you just, as Mitch said, you drive down the motorway, you turn left, and everything's flat. You think you're just going to end up in Holland or something. You know, you just keep driving, and all of a sudden there's like a little village there, and it's like straight from Midsummer's Murders. You know, it's really picturesque, but it doesn't suit the Newcastle lifestyle, I suppose. But it's each to their own. Nice people, but no, I haven't watched Newcastle play there, but I have watched Norwich play there.
Steve Hasty, have you had a trip to Norwich?
Not to the games, I haven't. No, I've been to Norwich a couple of times. I've done some deliveries in Norwich before, Norwich, Kings Lynn, all that area, and I know what it's like driving around that particular neck of the woods. Like Stu says, absolutely totally flat. But we met some smashing Norwich fans over the years in the Strawberry before and after games, and they've always been quite, quite amicable people, decent people, all want to talk about football, just like to, obviously love their football club, like to travel. and like to meet like-minded fans, you know. So we have met some really good fans. And following on from what Mitch said about Ollie Burton, we start with Ollie, and he talked about being in the director's box and the work that he was doing at Norwich at that particular time. And we did have an interesting conversation, if I remember rightly, with him that one particular night when I'm not sure whether you were there as well, Steve, where he talked about we talked about first of all Delia's cooking, and then he talked about the sweet smell of Delia and our husband and the friendliness and the politeness of them. But there was one particular incident where there was a strange smell had occurred in the director's box, if I remember rightly, and Ollie owned up and said it was him when it really wasn't, because he thought it was our husband. I'll leave everybody else to their imagination about what was going on there, but that was just typical Ollie. He wouldn't have a bad word to say, for anyone to say about anybody, you know. And the way that he told the story was just absolutely gentlemanly, you know, in his and the way that he even, if I remember rightly, with the people that were in the company, he even said, "Do you mind if I actually tell this story, because it's a little bit risky?" And it wasn't risky at all, but that's the politeness of the man, you know. It was just great. But I think when you hear that other clubs are so welcoming of past supporters, you know, past players, it really strikes home to you how important past players are to the history of football clubs, Steve. When you've just had Mirandino on there, you've had all the entertainers this week so far. It's been absolutely fantastic. But those players still live with us. Those memories still live with us. And I think that's important going on in the future for Newcastle United, that sort of opportunity remains, and that we keep those memories alive and keep the memories going, whether it be the Fairs Cup lads, whether it be the 1974 team, whether it would be the guys like Malcolm who does shows and things. It's very important to the history of the football club.
Okay, Steve Wilkinson, any trips to Norwich?
Well, there's a funny story trip. Obviously, I went to that game that I mentioned, but a story about a trip to Norwich was by boat. It must be about 1974-75. I was on the Broads with the lads, having a sort of drinking holiday that you do, bar to bar. And we're in Great Yarmouth the night before Newcastle were due to play Ipswich. I think it was a Tuesday night we're playing Ipswich. It might have even been the first game of the season. So we had planned that we would go to the game, but the thing you had to do was to get from Great Yarmouth to Norwich in time to get the train at about 5:30. So we're fleeing down the canals or the Broads at whatever speed you were allowed to go, 4 miles an hour or whatever it is, fleeing to get to Norwich to get the train. And we made it just in time, got on the train. And then when on the way to Ipswich, the train stopped and it was stuck for ages. And it turned out a wagon had driven into the pulpit on a bridge. And so we thought we were going to miss the kickoff. So while we had spent all day travelling to Norwich, we ended up, as I say, we thought we weren't even going to get to the match. But fortunately, the train managed to sort of ultimately crawl over this bridge, and we got to Ipswich with about quarter of an hour before kickoff. So no time for a drink, straight in the ground. And if I remember rightly, we won either 3-0 or 3-1. So it was a good night in the end. But it was that was an interesting football-related story about travelling to Norwich back in the mid-70s.
Good stuff. As always, we do our famous fans of Norwich City, and we'll try and catch the lads out. Difficult one this week. Celebrities, I don't know whether they could be called celebrities, but we'll have a look. Here we go then. First off,
Ed Bowles.
Ed Bowles, and I've got to say, fair play to Nicholas. He did get that in very early. He says getting it in early is it Ed Bowles? So he's obviously predicted who I was going to go for. Next.
Oh, came off the telly.
Yeah.
He's Blue Peter presenter.
Former anyway on the Sky TV.
Yeah.
Sky Sports. Is his surname Thomas?
That's it. Simon Thomas.
That's correct.
Well done, Steve. Back at the net there, son.
That's
Jake Humphrey.
Jake Humphrey.
Jake Humphrey.
Top man, by the way.
Newcastle
Jake.
fan.
Yeah, he does. He's stuck up for Newcastle. He's been spot on.
Made in
Made
class.
class.
We could have took your time, lads. You could have took your time.
End of the
Put a
show.
fella back on and take ages to guess.
I'll have to dig out a video when she did the one show. She came to St James's Park, and I got asked to go and teach her the blading races. I've got it somewhere, and I had to go up with my daughter, who was only 2 at the time. So I've got a photograph of me, miling class, and my daughter at St James's Park. But I did teach her the blading races and what was significant about it. I'll dig it out. I'll try and get it on here one night. There we go. Next one.
Is it the man or the woman?
The man.
It looks like Marty Fellow, but it's
No.
not.
It
Is
looks
it?
more like Hugh Jackman to me.
Yes, that's what I'm.
Well done. Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
It's exactly who it is. Hugh Jackman. That's a good one. Of course, the biggest Norwich City fan is
Delia.
Delia.
Where are you?
Delia Smith. Yeah, I decided to go for a more pleasant photograph than us shouting and bawling on the pitch. And last but by no means least,
Stephen Fry.
Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
Stephen Fry, of course.
Young Stephen Fry, that isn't it?
Big,
Very young.
big Norwich City fan. Okay, players that played for both clubs. So we'll start off with an easy one.
Tim.
Current goalkeeper, of course, at Norwich City now.
Chris Hutton.
Chris Hutton, of course, who managed both teams.
Bellamy.
Bellas.
Craig Bellamy.
Fox.
Black and white socks.
That's the game we're talking about as well, isn't it? That's the
Right.
that's Pioneer.
Yeah.
Bassong.
Seb Bassong.
The song.
Sebastian Basson.
And that's
Jamal Lewis.
yeah.
Current Newcastle player, of course.
Jonas.
Yes, Jonas.
Jonas.
Anton
Sibierski.
Sibierski.
Sibierski, yeah.
That's Darren
Huckabee.
Huckabee. That's Hookers.
Maybe.
Darren Huckabee. And last but by no means least,
Brucey.
Steve Bruce, holding with a milk cup after beating Sunderland. Yeah, well done, lads. Clean sweep for you this week. Was a difficult one for me. Couldn't set you up, no ways. And I just mentioned that game as well. That was a wonderful game. 4-3 under Rafa Benitez. Who said Rafa Benitez played dull football? Wonderful result that. Great game to be at, and fantastic. Just as that was, of course, mentioned a little bit earlier. Ginian Wijnaldum in the 6-2 with four goals. George, let's come to you for your all-time Newcastle Norwich team then.
Mixture of sentimentality and people I know, really, as well as anything. Tim Crullen goal, Ollie Burton right back, Jonas at left back, and midfield it would be Scott Parker, central defender Kevin Scott, and then Jackie Bell, who I did actually play with. He was in the juniors, just as leaving the juniors just as I was joining, and was in the Youth Cup winning team of that period. And he ended his career at Norwich. A diabetic all his life, and still had a successful professional career, which speaks volumes for his control. In the front line, Ruel Fox, Sobieski, and here's a sentimental one, number 9, Tony Loma, because for lots of reasons I picked Tony, and Bellamy, and then another sentimental one, Bill Punton, who played left wing, and once or twice in the A team and the B team, I got the chance to play with Bill Punton, a lovely Scotsman who had a very, very delicate left foot, very good dribbler, and he ended his career at Norwich as well. So that's mine. and oodles and oodles of substitutes. I mean, you know, Albert Bennett, Viv Busby, Mick Shannon, Paul Dalgleish, Fraser Foster. I mean, you could go on and on and on. We've got some good links with them, actually. There's a lot to pick from. More than I anticipated, I have to say. When I saw it was Norwich City, I was thinking where we're going to get players from there. But it's surprising how many they are. And I enjoyed that. Definitely
a surprising one. Yeah, go on then, Mitch.
Okay, so I've gone with a 4-3-3. Krull and goal. I've slipped Jonas in at right back, and then centre back Grant Hanley, and the other centre back, my former neighbour Sebastian Bassong. Left back I've gone Jamal Lewis, and then the midfield three Rule Fox, Ollie Burton in the centre midfield, and I've gone with Jacob Murphy on the other side, and then a front three of Darren Huckabee, Craig Bellamy, and Justin Fashanu, who, you know, it really deserves a mention. You know, we forget how talented he was, and we never really saw that at St James's Park for a number of reasons. And his story's quite a sad one at the end. Manager Chris Hughton, and I'm going to give an honourable mention to a former player called Jay French, who was a Canadian international who played at Norwich with Craig Bellamy, and had one of the Canadian bids to buy the club off Ashley gone through, he would have been my managing director.
Excellent, good stuff. Stu?
Well, I've got an admission. I didn't pick my team.
Oh, never.
No, I've got one, but I didn't pick it. It was given to us.
Oh, right.
Last week when the show finished, and we said it was Norwich, we made Darren, who Stephen Mitchell met, so it was straight away and started rifling players at us. So I said, well, pick the team if you want. Now, Darren's been bad with COVID before Christmas, really bad, hospitalised and collapsed lung and everything, but he's on the mend now. So I thought I'd better mention him and mention his team. And I want to state live on the show that there's no truth to the rumour that he was in hospital to avoid buying his last Christmas present. He genuinely was ill. And just want to get all that cleared up, because there is a rumour going around that was the case. So the team he's sent was Chris Hughton as the manager, Tim Krul in goal, who's probably got the nicest father in football, Peter. Then there was a back three of Kevin Scotts, Titus Bramble and Sebastian Bassong. Rule Fox and his black white socks on the wing, with Jonas on the other wing. Scott Parker in the middle, because apparently he was at Norwich when he was younger. And then a front three of Bellas, Huckabee and Mick Shannon. And that's that.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, Justin Fashanu, there is a great show on Sky Documentaries if you get a chance to watch it about Justin's life. Very sad life, but very, very well worth a watch if you've got a couple of hours spare. Keep an eye out for it. Steve Hasty, your team?
I went for Krul in goal. Put Gutierrez on the right with a central defensive partnership of Hanley and Batsong with Lewis on the left. I went for Darren Huckabee on one side and Bellamy on the other as a midfield. And I went with Megson holding that together, Gary Megson. And I went with a diamond. So in front of them, I put Jacob Murphy. And alongside Jacob, or in front of Jacob, I put Mick Shannon, who I always thought was a great player, and Malcolm Allen. And my manager obviously was Chris Hooton, and an honourable mention to the assistant manager, assistant coach, or coach, whatever you want to call him. I put Paul Stevenson in because, as it was said with Lee yesterday on the show, Paul's just taken up a job with another actually Capital player up at Kilmarnock as coach. And Paul went to my school as well. And my father taught Paul, and so my dad always used to follow Paul's career everywhere he went. He thought he was a great footballer. I don't know, he didn't say much about him in class, but he thought he was a great footballer.
Fantastic. Steve Wilkinson, finish with you, mate.
Right. Well, I've got a 4-3-3 formation as well. Tim Krul in goal, Ollie Burton at right back, Kevin Scott and Sebastian Bassong in the middle, and Jamal Lewis at left side. Midfield, Rule Fox on the right, Scott Parker in the middle, and Jonas on the right, on the left side of that. And the three up front, Carl Court, Craig Bellamy and Albert Bennett, who George mentioned. I remember Albert Bennett scoring a hell of a lot of goals and some fantastic goals when sort of late 60s or early 60s, mid 60s. So him and goal manager Chris Houghton, naturally. And let's have a sub. I'm going to put Des Hamilton because he brings back bad memories of when we started to go downhill after the Keegan era and Dalglish came in.
Fantastic. Some great memories, some nice comments as well. Nick Williams, great show, excellent stuff, getting Mirror on. Old enough to have seen him play live. Dave Cook, another great show, another great guest. Thanks very much, lads. And Mark Byers says, love the retro show, some great memories from my era. Thanks all. No retro show next week because Newcastle, of course, play on Monday. It puts us all back a day. So we've got 2 weeks to get our Spurs stories ready, lads. Tottenham Hotspur, we haven't done them yet. Big team. Some great games and some great players have played for both. Obviously, get your thinking caps on, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time with the next retro show. But for now, it's good night from me, good night from the lads. Take care, lads.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Goodbye, everybody.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn.